Serious? Hey Reddit, what was your thank god I looked at the contract moment? My wife and I were 3 days away from signing paperwork to buy a condo and they sent us the latest and we noticed that they changed the interest rate by a tiny amount, like 0.2%. They said the change was because they ran our credit, so they altered the interest to reflect our current credit rating. That left a bad taste in our mouth, so we said no thanks and walked away. The next week my company got bought out and they moved us out of state. If we would have signed, we would have had to either immediately sell or quit my job. That's called a floating rate. You are pre-approved for a mortgage at a certain rate, but it's not locked in until you actually get the mortgage. Joined the Army National Guard right out of HS and was eligible for a 20k bonus lump sum for the job I picked, as it was stated in my contract. Recruiter told me that wasn't the case. I would receive the first half after completing all initial entry training, and the other after 3 years of service. I double checked and verified and brought the sum B to him. To his surprise, he didn't believe anyone, an 18-year-old, would read their contracts. Also, these bonus rules change all the time. Being a little biased as I came from the recruiting and retention community, I can say he may simply have missed that particular bonus message that went out. Regardless, the recruiters have nothing to do with paying out anything, and as long as it was in your contract, your admin section would process it out to you. Had a non-compete in a radio contract that said I would have to sit out 90 days if I left for any reason. Wouldn't sign it until it was revised to be non-compete only if I quit. When they asked why, I told them if I sucked so bad that they fired me, wouldn't it be to their advantage to have me work for their competition? They had no answer for that. When I was going to buy the Sprint iPhone 4S, it said if phone gets lost the client shall have to pay Sprint LMT $100 to replace the SIM card and $399, which is overpriced, for a replacement 64GB iPhone with order and shipment fees. I am glad I didn't buy it. Was starting a new job and expected a pretty straightforward contract of employment. However, I knew that with these things, I have to read it with a fine-tooth comb. Now for context, most jobs in the UK where I am offer 25 days of annual leave per year. My contract however said just 20, as I'd never had a job that didn't offer 25 days. I pushed back on it by asking if this was legal, not to my new employer, but to the recruiter. Got a response back 10 minutes later that the company's offering me 25 days holiday and I took it. Some time later when I'm at this new firm, I was discussing holidays with another guy who joined roughly the same time as me and he only had 20 days of holiday, despite us being at a very similar level in terms of seniority and experience. He was kicking himself for not pushing back on this point. I wish this was the norm in the US. I finally have a story for one of these posts. Woohoo. During my apprenticeship whilst at college, was initially an 18-month course at college, not normal college but 3 days on-site training at oil and gas training and 2 days in college. Got to the final month and the training apprenticeship scheme company said they were changing the course and adding another 2 months on for additional courses for us to have additional qualifications. No worries, right? Good for us? Yep, they kept saying they would bring in new contracts this week. Brought in part of paperwork that stated we agreed to all terms and conditions in the new contract, but they somehow forgot the new contract. All my college mates were away to sign. I, being the smart one, told them to hold off until we read the contract. Managers tried to bulls us saying that nothing changed etc blah blah. I stood my ground and they brought contract in 3 days later. I read it and 3 new things had been added. 1. Any days off from now will constitute gross misconduct and you get flung off course straight away. 2. You agree to pay all training costs if you leave course at all during final 2 months. 3. They will not now guarantee you a job placement for the final 2 years of your apprenticeship offshore. No one signed. Refused to do any work. Had to get the CEO of company involved to change it back to original and to guarantee us all job placements for final 2 years. Thank God I read that, or about 40% of my class would have been thrown off for days off. There's this website where everything was free, just pay shipping, all high-end looking crap. I went to the terms and conditions and read it. No matter how much you put in your cart, they pick one item at random and that's what you get. They also can't guarantee that what the picture shows is what it is. They can also decide not to send you anything. I noped right out. If it's too good to be true, it is. Sounds like Wish. I'm a professional actor. Last summer, I auditioned for the local Ren Fair, not realizing that it wasn't a paid gig. Found out a week into the rehearsal process. Oh well, I thought to myself, I agreed to this, I should have done better research. So, about a month and a half later, the contracts come out. They're standard stuff for the most part. We won't hold the fair accountable if we get injured. We acknowledge we represent the company and thus won't do X, Y, and Z unprofessional things during fair hours, etc., etc. But buried in the middle of the contract is a non-compete clause, which basically forbade the signer from working for any other Ren Fair or Halloween event within 100 miles for a full year. The other folks at the fair were a lot less concerned about it, but I was absolutely not okay with that. They weren't paying me, and I wasn't going to sign off to not make money in a part of the industry for a solid year. I bailed basically as soon as the contracts were given to us. My HR told me that I did not get paid for jury duty. I talked to my dad and took his advice to review my contract. I replied to HR with a screenshot of my contracting saying I get paid. Once got an offer to live close to campus but not too close right after turning 21. Was about to sign and noticed the clause that said no alcoholic drinks on the premise. So I could get hammered down the street but not drink there. No thanks. Not sure if this counts, but Spectrum, like most big telecom, sent me an email saying that they are increasing my bill by $10 more. When I called in they tried to convince me I was on a promotional period, which I was not since I was already a customer of 3 years and read to them my bill and customer agreement with dates. After explaining to them that they are, indeed, lying to me and being transferred around to 3 people within cancellations, they miraculously found a way to reduce my bill by $15 going forward. Even though they backed down, it makes me sad to think about those who aren't apt enough, like my grandparents, to notice these money grabs and how much money these companies make by pulling this crap. A couple years ago my husband and I were looking to replace his car after an accident totaled it. We went to a dealership in New Orleans to test drive a specific car that we had checked out ahead of time. Even printed out the dealer's listing from their website so we could nail down the price we wanted. We got to the dealership and were immediately scooped up by their top man who had another sale going on at the same time. We handed him the listing and said it was the only one we wanted to see. He said sure and would have one of the training salespeople pull the car for us. The girl came and found us with the key. We checked it out, and husband loved it. We got to the signing table and the price went from $13K to $16K. I asked to see the complete contract before we signed anything. It was the wrong freaking car. We were looking for a 2013 base model with less than 60k miles. They tried to sell us a 2010 luxury model with almost 230k miles. The top man came back just in time for the sale and tried to blame it all on the trainee. After a very heated discussion with top man about now taking our business elsewhere since he tried to screw us, dealership owner graced us with his presence and said the one we were there to see was on loaner, and they thought we would like this one better anyway. After even more arguing, we left and found a cheaper version of the luxury model in Slidell with only 80k miles for very near our price point. Wow, frick that guy. My employers tried to get all of us to sign a non-compete that geographically encompassed the entire globe as well as any profession even closely related. Negotiated a house rental contract to keep rent fixed for 3 years with no increase. While reading the fine print, found out that they sneaked in a penalty clause of 9 months rent if I decide to leave before the 3 years were up. A bit of a different take on the question. TLDR. Make others present you with proof you agreed to a contract before blindly accepting their assertion that you had one with them. My wife worked for a community college as a faculty assistant professor for the past 9 years. At the same time, she was working to complete her PhD and using the college's tuition reimbursements to assist with some of the fees. She decided to move on to a new position elsewhere and was told via email she would owe approximately $4,000 to reimburse the college for their tuition reimbursement payments. They informed her via email she needed to work there for 3 years after each payment in order to earn it. My wife asked to see where she had ever agreed to this in writing and there was silence. No email response was received. On her official last day, she met with HR and, at the end of the meeting, the HR rep admitted they had never followed any of their tuition reimbursement procedures with my wife and none of the paperwork that was supposed to be completed, including informing my wife of the 3-year policy and her acceptance of it, had ever been presented to her. The HR rep said, "You'll receive an invoice for about $4,000 in the mail one day. What you do with it is up to you." So this is really more of a thank God I asked them to present me with the contract moment than what was requested, but I think it's in the ballpark of what's being asked. Was trying to buy a used car. I researched how to do it since I had never purchased a car before. Prevailing advice was to walk in with your own financing. Find a car that I liked. After several weeks of shopping, I had already notified them of my pre-approved financing and they began running the finance paperwork. I realized as they start pushing things for me to sign that the APR was like 7 points higher than what I walked in with and started asking questions. They tried to say it was because they couldn't get a hold of my financial institution of choice, but it was okay because I was approved by so many of theirs. I was suspicious and I took the other advice I had read about car shopping. Don't be afraid to walk. I had run out of time before needing to be at work anyway, so it was good timing in that respect. During some downtime at work I got calls from the dealer saying they got a hold of my lender. Weird, since I was trying to call the lender I had chosen and got nothing. It then dawned on me after listening to the message system that I wasn't getting a hold of anyone because it was a bank holiday. That being the case, how is it that this car dealer had gone through back channels to presumably get a hold of them or anyone else? Fishy. The following morning I called the lender. They said they had been closed, so there was no back channel access. Since they had approved the dealer as someone they would do business with, they told me the dealer had to honor what they, the lender, offered to me, and if they didn't there would be follow up with QA. I was given a phone number to call in case the dealer continued to try its funny business with me. I told my story to a guy that used to work at a dealership and he asked if anyone was celebrating and high-fiving me as I was leaving with my car. Nah, they were pretty bland. He then told me that means I got a good deal. No one was celebrating because I read the contract and made sure they honored the pre-approved deal with my lender, thus meaning they weren't getting 7 points extra on the back end. I closed on a house and saw the interest rate was listed as 7.5%. It was supposed to be 4%. My lawyer said, "Oh, that's just a typo. Go ahead and sign now, and we'll correct it next week." Nope. A program that my son is a part of for Deaf and Ho puts on field trips every now and then. We are down with our kid going on field trips, but the waiver that you have to sign states that the program is not responsible for any harm that comes to the child even if they are found negligent. Depending on where you are, that might not be legally binding. 2 years ago I went to get a new phone and plan that required a contract. The guy was like, "Hey, this plan comes with a free tablet, you just need to add the data coverage for it." I thought awesome. Free stuff, then excused myself to look at the tablet in question. They were selling them for $100 without the plan. I came back and asked how much the coverage was per month. $10 per month for a year. Then I could drop the coverage with no penalty. Nope, the frick out of that deal. I was buying my first apartment. The ad said $350K for 3 bedrooms and free body corporate for a year. Call the guy and he says it's actually 2 bedrooms and a study and they'd get me to come to his office instead of seeing the place. I insist on seeing the apartment, show up with my father the next week. It's 1 bedroom. The study wasn't its own room but a piece of particle board he glued to the wall. Every time I asked where the remaining bedroom was, he dodged the question. It was actually $100K more than he said it was, and my father got him to admit that the body corporate wouldn't be free either. The entire thing was a con job built to trick first home buyers into purchasing overpriced new apartments because the developers couldn't sell them normally and needed to at least make their money back. Last I checked they're still trying to sell them 2 years later and haven't changed the incorrect ad. It was a pretty obvious con, but we don't get a lot of actual "I'm going to screw up your entire life on purpose" con artists around here. That my kindergartner could be questioned by the police without the presence of or notification of parent or guardian. Katie ISD Handbook. While the ISD is correct, minors still have Miranda rights. I would tell your kids to talk to an officer after they have spoken to you first. Minors still have every right to not have to talk to the police, same as you and me. Suicide Girls model contract. My ex was offered to come on board, not just as a hopeful, but a model. Read the contract and said frick no. They only pay one model daily based on album of the day, a measly few hundred last I recall. They force nudity. Non-nude isn't good enough. The last part says we reserve the right to use your photos with technology that has not been invented yet. Awful company. Legit sell your soul. Nope. Reminds me of that Suicide Girl AMA. What a disaster that was because people called them out on BS just like this. Herbalife. I didn't look at the contract because there wasn't one. As soon as the phone interview got to now, canvassing is not the easiest part, but if you have others in your downline, that helps. I hung up. They desperately called back for 2 days until I finally told them to frick themselves. Good job dodging a pyramid scheme. Most people that do MLMs lose money. I merged with another business and combined offices into a larger suite in the same building. I was the 90% owner, my partner was 10% and close to retirement, or so he said. When we entered the lease, I noticed a collection of little provisions that amounted to, if you breach the lease and don't cure in 3 days, we keep your stuff. About a year later, I make my final payment on the purchase and the seller tells me he is resigning, taking his clients and setting up shop elsewhere. Same day the landlord comes over and gives me a BS eviction, then another and another. I'm swimming in eviction notices and can't possibly cure them. So I hire at least 20 people to move everything out of the company into a warehouse. All stock, all racks, all furniture, everything. Lawsuit happens next between myself and the seller, and as we are doing discovery I find that the seller and the landlord entered into a partnership and the guy I bought the company from is operating rent-free in the exact same spot I was evicted from. TLDR. Commercial lease says landlord can assume ownership of my stuff 3 days into a breach. Landlord and business partner started a competing company together and were stunned when I moved everything out on day 2 of the eviction. Sued them and discovered their partnership. Workplace changed their contract when I renewed. Original IP clause was we own what you make on our premises or on our equipment, no matter when or why you do it. I'm paraphrasing. New one was we own what you make, no matter when, where, why or on whose equipment you make it. Nah. My enlistment papers. I was promised in writing to be incorporated into certain programs that this branch of military could not provide. When I tried to save 15% by switching to the Lizard's insurance company, they had me on the phone for over an hour. Figures changes so many times and they convinced me I was saving. I agreed to switch. Received an email almost immediately with everything I needed to do to make it official. I reviewed the numbers once again. My good neighbor insurance beat them solidly. I cancelled all changes. I should have listened a little more closely. I came back from studying abroad for my last semester of uni and my roommate told me I had to go to the office and sign to get out of the lease. I went and asked them about the paperwork. Took a quick glance and asked, "Wait, this is to sign out of the lease?" "No mom, this is to sign for another year." I left and asked if my roommate knew she was signing on another year. Thank God I asked, because now she's stuck in another year in the apartment with no one to share the lease. How can you sign a piece of paper without reading what you're signing for? Quite a while ago I bought an extended warranty for something from Walmart. When I got home I found out they put in an act of God clause that basically made sure they'd never have to pay up. LMAO, what is that like? We are not liable for any damage caused by the act of God, where the act of God is defined as literally anything ever. I once had to sign a contract for a job saying if I met anyone famous I couldn't write about them. I met David Gilmour. Jokes on them, cause your girl has like 6 fanfics on him that I've been written since I was 13. But I lied and said I wouldn't. He hasn't sued me yet, so. Was looking around at animal shelters for a dog 2 years ago. One shelter's application for adoption stated it was a legally binding contract that said the shelter would be listed first on the animal's microchip. If we ever needed to rehome the dog for any reason, we'd return it to the shelter. We'd inform the shelter within 10 days of moving, and we give permission for law enforcement to enter our home to retrieve the dog if the shelter feels it necessary. Violation of any of these conditions was grounds for them taking the dog back. We went to the Humane Society across town, where the vetting process goes. Got an ID? Money for adoption? Here's your dog. Back when Solar City was at peak popularity, we talked with a representative about their rooftop solar plan. Essentially rent to own over 20-30 years. Don't recall now. And SC collects the gov rebate check. It's exciting to be part of the future and all that, but I was concerned about the long-term ramifications. Example, if you want to sell your house later, the prospective buyer has to agree to take on the solar contract. Yeah, like selling a house isn't already a hassle, right? But then I looked into the paperwork as to exactly how much Solar City would be charging for electricity, pulled a utility bill from our electric company, and was stunned to find that SC electricity cost more. Wah? I confronted the rep, asked why on earth would we want to install solar panels, only to pay more for our electricity. He had no answer, and I showed him the door. So glad I didn't follow a lot of my neighbors into that stinker of a deal. Was preparing to make an offer on a condo. Buried in the document containing their HOA rules and fees was a cute little sentence saying that dues were going to nearly triple in 2 years. Nope. Got fricked over, but better late than never. Signed a licensing contract with a publisher for 1 volume of an original work. He sent me a contract copy to review. I checked it out and it looked good. Then he sent me a real one on nice paper to sign and return, and I did that. 1 year later he approached a friend of mine about licensing and publication and they said no, and asked me what the frick was up with the contract that was asking for lifetime rights to the work. I had a sinking feeling and checked. Yep, in the final draft I was sent, he changed 1 line from first volume to lifetime of the property. For comparison, my first volume was complete at the time, but the entire property will take me decades to finish. Claimed we discussed it on the phone and I agreed. I would absolutely never. Spent the next few years weaseling my way out of it and got out. My eventual thank God I looked at the contract, but I can't even measure the damage my career took and I don't like thinking about it. My other friends who were signed with him also fared worse than I did, and most of them took hits that lasted for several years as well and did irreversible damage to their brands and audiences. His company is mostly dead in the water now, but last I heard he's only working with folks from second and third world countries because they will sign anything. Moral of the story: read every line of your contracts and also try not to make agreements over the phone. Get it in writing. A lot of manipulative people actively avoid leaving a paper trail so they can gaslight you later. Whenever I sign liability waivers, like say for a 5k race or a boat tour, I glance through and cross out all the parts that say that I won't hold them responsible for negligence. The person taking the waiver either never notices or never cares. I've done that too, although I have no idea if it's legally binding once I do it. I'm a bit late to the thread, but I had a work with crappy salary, so searched for a new job. Got an interview. Phone interview, no oral interview. Later got the contract that I required to sign. It was a bunch of papers to read, thought, and somewhere in the contract it said something along these lines: before you start working you need to pay us a fee of $5,000 that you will get back over time. Was supposed to be renting to own a house. It needed quite a bit of work, and was quite frankly disgusting and borderline uninhabitable before we moved in. Literally filled to my chest with stuff throughout the entire house. I'm 5'4". It was agreed we would pay the remainder of the note on the house, about $20k, for a 4-bedroom 2.5 bath on 2 acres. Lived there about 3 months before they even drew up the contract with their lawyer, and cleaned out most of the rooms and burned probably 100 bags of trash they had throughout the yard. They show up at my job at 9 at night and want me to sign it right there. Basically told them I needed time to read it and I'd get back with them the next day. Get home and go over this contract with my husband, and it is literally just something basic printed off the internet. Nothing filled in, and it said that at the end of the contract the house went back to them. I don't freaking think so. My ex-wife and I went to buy her a new car. Went through the process. picked it out, negotiated the price and trade-in, did the paperwork, and away we went in her new car. This was a Sunday. The next day the dealership calls us and tells us they forgot to get us to sign a few things and asked us to come in. So we head up to the dealership that evening and the salesman slides over a few things. The X already highlighted, he tells me to sign in one spot, her to sign in another. As I was her co-signer, she didn't have the greatest credit at the time. Before I signed it I noticed they switched our names around, me as the buyer and her as the co-signer. I turned it back around and pointed out the error. He brushed that off and just said it's fine. We just need your signatures and you are off. I told the guy I wasn't signing it and wanted to talk to the sales manager. Sales manager comes over and explains it to me. Basically on Sunday they can't get confirmation from the bank, so they basically go off our credit scores and assume the bank will be okay. Well, her credit wasn't strong enough even with me as a co-signer, but my credit was great and they would approve me. I flipped my crap. They ran my credit again to see if the bank would approve me and tried to pull it over our heads. I told him I wasn't buying the car. I wasn't signing it. I would be in the market for a car in a few months and I didn't want a new car already on my credit when I went to buy mine. He told me they didn't have any choice and the bank wouldn't finance her. So I told them to bring her trade-in back around and we'll undo the deal. They went away for a while and came back telling me they would figure it out with the bank the next day. I told them they better not pull any crap. I would be checking with the bank to make sure my name isn't listed. They assured me that wouldn't happen. In the end they must have done something, because my name didn't appear on the title or the loan other than co-signer. She was listed and we never heard from them again. It wasn't really something I caught so much as something I lucked out on. A coworker of mine went through a breakup and needed a roomie. He lived in a 1-bedroom, so I slept on the sofa for a month until the lease was up. We signed a new lease for a 2-bedroom and moved. The monthly amount seemed cheaper than what I had expected. I double checked the amount versus what was listed on their website, and we were paying about $200 less a month than what we were supposed to. We paid the first month's rent, and I got a call from the landlord asking us to come to her office. She had a new lease drawn up and asked us to sign it since she put the wrong amount down. I looked at my roomie, looked at her, and said, "No, mom, I think we'll stick with our current lease." She looked shocked, but she didn't try to force the matter. I love that cheap apartment. The realtor we chose to help us purchase a home, who is a family friend, wrote up the initial paperwork for the deal on a house. I read through everything since I worked with a lot of legal documents in my job at the time. There was a clause that the seller and her realtor had added that basically said something along the lines of accepting the house in as is condition after however many days has expired without them hearing from us and our realtor. I kept bringing this up to our realtor that we needed to respond and he assured me everything would be fine. Then at the last minute before the deal would have gone through as is he realized I was in fact right and we needed to hurry back with a response with our requests. I was so annoyed and honestly, it all devolved from there. Should have been an indication to me how much of a pain this transaction was going to be. Got a check in the mail for $1,000. It said just deposit into your bank account and pay for school supplies. On the back it said I would need to pay $1,450 back over the course of 10 months. $1,450 later for $1,000 today. No thank you. I went to first grade. Looking for a rental suite in Vancouver. The landlord wanted me to be responsible for insuring his place in case of natural disaster or damage to property from pipe bursts and appliance failure. WTF. Somewhat related to this, I went to a car dealership for service once and during payment they asked me to sign one invoice which they would give me a copy of and a second work record type document which I would not get a copy of. Nope. If a car dealership, especially a car dealership, wants a signature on something, then provide a copy of what's signed or don't bother to ask. Service counter chick made the world's biggest sigh before copying it for me, which only made it look that much more sketch. Boss handed me a new contract for more hours. I made a joke about not trusting my company. Lo and behold, it had more hours but less pay per hour. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.